of Priests for Life. We are broadcasting on Sunday night, the 4th of November, in another one of our pro-life MAGA broadcasts, and we're going to talk tonight about a powerful book and a powerful movie that goes with it. I've talked to you about it before, but tonight we're going to delve into its message in detail. Dinesh D'Souza's book and movie, Death of a Nation. And you can actually watch the movie now online, on demand, at deathofanationmovie.com. I want to urge you, and as we go along tonight, you'll see why, to watch this movie before Election Day. Now, if you have not voted yet, or if you have friends or family, co-workers or fellow worshipers who have not voted yet, not only do we need you to nudge them, remind them, motivate them to vote, but one of the best things you could do, get them to watch this movie. It's available right online, on demand, deathofanationmovie.com. This really is an eye-opener. There are few books that you will read that are more of an eye-opener than this one, because it's not just history. I mean, this is all factual, documented research. It's not just history. It is an accurate rewriting of history, rewriting it towards the truth, not towards fiction or exaggeration, in a way that reverses lies that have been told at all levels of society and for a long time, and by some very powerful and influential people. This is history purified. This is lies refuted. And it's lies about things that impact you and me and our whole country, namely the actual positions and activities of major political parties. This book, the subtitle is Plantation Politics and the Making of the Democratic Party. At issue in this midterm election is not just what individuals, what men and women are going to be elected. At issue here is what party is going to be put into power. Will the Democratic Party again take over the House of Representatives in the United States Congress? Well, every House race can affect that. Many of these races and the whole balance of power are so close that any individual congressional race can affect this. And brothers and sisters, that means that your vote and the votes of our fellow citizens have implications for what party is in power, and therefore it's not enough to inform ourselves about the candidate. And we've had a number of programs here talking about how to find out information about the candidate, and we've talked about the differences in where the parties stand. But tonight we're going to look at where the differences in where the parties stand lie at a deeper level, at a deeper historical level. And I'm telling you, this is going to be an eye-opener. Now, Death of a Nation, sort of the other side of the coin of a movie called Birth of a Nation, which is a racist movie. Woodrow Wilson, Democrat, racist President Woodrow Wilson, actually had a screening of Birth of a Nation at the White House when he occupied it, and that led to the revival nationwide of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, we'll get more to details about that in a moment. What this book is about saving America a second time. Saving America a second time after the first Republican president helped save it the first time. You know who I'm referring to? Who was the first Republican president? President Abraham Lincoln was the first president from the Republican Party. And his battle against slavery, his leadership during the Civil War, this was a presidency, this was a leadership that had profound implications for the saving of America from racism and fascism. What do we mean by these terms? This is what we're going to explore. This is what the book explores. This is what the movie explores in a way that you simply won't find anywhere else. Former President Barack Obama said he wanted to radically transform America. Brothers and sisters, that means you have to kill the America that exists now. And that is, in fact, what we see the Democrat Party constantly trying to do. But the fact of the matter is we are conservative. That means we want to conserve the America that the founders have given us, the principles on which it rests, and the freedoms that we all enjoy as Americans. We don't need to radically transform America. We need to keep growing America and keep making America great by making America more and more of what she was originally founded to be. That's the direction in which we have to go, and this particular election will decide if we're going to go in that direction or if we're going to put power back into the hands of a party that does, in fact, want to kill what America is now, abandon the principles it was founded on, tell us that the Constitution could be morphed in any direction at any time, and indeed ally itself, and this may sound extreme until you start reading the book and watching the movie. This may sound extreme, but a party, the Democratic Party, that actually embodies racism and fascism in the United States of America today. We're going to see exactly why that is true. When the first Republican president was elected, President Abraham Lincoln, his election, much like that of President Trump, was bitterly opposed. People were saying that he was an extremist. They tried to block him at every turn. And in fact, those who tried to block President Trump today and his administration and the Republican Party, and those of us who are allied with him and his team, will tar us by using the descriptions of racism and fascism. But actually, they've got it wrong. They've got it in reverse. And this film and this movie, this book, show that those terms, fascism and racism, properly describe the Democratic Party and its history and its leaders, not the Republican Party. Those terms describe political liberalism, not conservatism. And we're going to show you why. This book, this movie, Death of a Nation by Dinesh D'Souza, shows us the big lie. The big lie that has been told is that the once racist Democrat Party, who brought us segregation and the Ku Klux Klan and slavery, and the party of Lincoln that fought against slavery, reversed their positions. And the once racist Democrat Party are now the good guys, and the Republicans are now the bad guys because they swapped positions. That's the story of the big lie. That's the narrative of the left. What we are going to see here is that exactly the opposite is true. I want to read for you a few quotes, and then I want to show you the trailer of the movie, and then we'll get into these details a whole lot more. From page 182 of the book, quote, Democrats have never publicly admitted their role over nearly 2 centuries of being the party of slavery, of segregation, Jim Crow, racial terrorism, the Ku Klux Klan, and also fascism and Nazism. Every Southern segregation law was passed by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Democratic governor, and enforced by Democratic officials. Page 200, the confiscatory principle, you work, I eat, is the basic ideology of Democrats. The entire welfare state, from the New Deal to contemporary Democratic schemes, is rooted in the same plantation philosophy of legally sanctioned theft. And finally, from page 212, Democrats have created an expanded plantation system that incorporates blacks, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and Hispanics. The plantation is the new venue for the most crippling racism that exists today. And those assertions are backed up page after page after page of very careful reasoning and diligent research. I want to thank Dinesh D'Souza once again for doing this. We'll get into the details of this book Let me show you now the trailer to the movie, which again, I urge you to go to this website and watch it before Election Day. Watch it before you vote. Get your friends to watch it before they vote. Let's take a look at the trailer.
Lincoln was elected to unite a country and stop slavery. Democrats smeared him, went to war against him, assassinated him. Now their target is Trump.
America was never great! Slavery, genocide, and war!
Donald Trump wins the presidency.
So help me God.
They say he's killing America.
There will be a vote to impeach.
They say he's a racist
This was a white lash.
and a fascist. Who are the real racists?
Northern Democrats had conspired together with Southern Democrats to take away the fruit of other people's labor.
Who are the real fascists?
Both Mussolini and Hitler set up and ran welfare states.
This was done by the do-gooders, the liberals, the people who wanted to improve society.
Which party attacks our free speech?
How dare you speak against the Führer?
Our religious liberty and our personal safety? A nation dies when its people are not free. We too must fight for freedom, regardless of the price we pay.
An end in terror is preferable to a terror with no end.
The stakes could not be higher. We're talking about America, the greatest nation on earth. Lincoln saved America for the first time. It's now up to us to save America a second time.
Trump is a patriot. He is saying, make America great again. He's a nationalist in the best sense of the term. Gandhi was a nationalist. Nelson Mandela was a nationalist. Churchill was a nationalist. Nationalism is not the same as socialism, and it's not the same as fascism. Fascist regimes are opposed to a free economy, limited government, individual rights and freedoms, property rights. We saw in Italy the rise of fascism under Mussolini, and fascism combines nationalism with socialism. The Democrat president, FDR, actually studied Mussolini's fascism, and they admired one another. Hitler came along and embodied National Socialism in the Nazi Party. That's where the term comes from, Nazi. Nationalism combined with socialism. Let's look a little bit more in detail at some of the things that the Nazi Party platform included, and you tell me if this doesn't sound like things that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren would be in favor of. State-controlled health care, state-controlled education, state-controlled media and the press, state-controlled banks and industries, state control of religious expression, money lenders and profiteers being punished, land being seized without compensation, and profit sharing for workers in large corporations. The Nazi Party platform, if that were read at a Democrat National Convention, it would be greeted with applause. Hitler was an anti-capitalist and believed that the individual did not exist for him or herself, but rather for the state. He also, unlike Mussolini, was a racist. Here is one of the key points of this whole analysis, that Hitler borrowed ideas from the Democratic Party here in the United States. Let me say that again. Let me write it here on the board. Hitler drew many of his ideas, learned from and borrowed from the Democratic Party in the United States. He decided to do on his side of the ocean what the Jacksonian Democrats did on this side of the ocean to the Native Americans. Hitler was in power at the same time that Democratic President FDR was in power here in the United States, and guess what? They admired each other and were in communication and learned from each other. One of the groups Hitler also learned from were the progressives, and progressivism, and you saw a little hint of this in the trailer of the movie. The progressives, the do-gooders, I'm going to improve humanity, and among such people, Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood. I'm going to improve humanity. I'm going to get rid of the human weeds, as she called them. I am going to purify humanity, and therefore, of course, Birth Control League gets underway, and of course that eventually morphs into the biggest abortion business in the world. Well, Hitler used that whole mentality for his eugenics program and the euthanasia program that he instituted, which of course eventually led to the mass killings of the Holocaust. And then his racist program, Hitler's racist program, well, where did he get that from? And the movie shows and the book shows, he looked again at what the Democrats were doing with segregation. The way the Democrats here in this country were dealing with African Americans, second-class citizens that they made them through the various segregation laws, this inspired Hitler. The Ku Klux Klan, brothers and sisters, was the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party. The Nazis also hated freedom of speech. The Heil Hitler salute, the draping all over the place of swastikas, were symbols of the fact that everyone was expected to conform to the thinking of Nazi ideology. An oppression of freedom of thought and freedom of speech. You can no longer speak your mind. You must toe the party line. What is this called nowadays right here? Political correctness. And this is exactly that we have never had a president coming more against political correctness, turning it upside down, chasing it out the door, than President Trump, and no one more actively in favor of the right that we all have to speak our mind. In fact, it's one of the reasons that I'm able to speak so boldly during this whole election season on the things that I'm telling you, including tonight. Because he's made it clear that pastors, clergy, churches, other organizations, nobody should be punished by the government or should feel hindered for speaking their mind, including on political matters. Hitler despised religious freedom. The Republicans today and President Trump are doing exactly the opposite. They are promoting, preserving, and protecting religious freedom like never before. The American progressives were the ones. The Democrats cheered the rise of Hitler and the hope that social control and a centralized state could be the model of the future. Then, of course, we know the sad history of what happened. The Holocaust took place, and the Nuremberg trials, and the inhumanity of what occurred was put on display for all the world. And so progressives and Democrats had a problem they had to solve. How do we make sure that future generations of Americans don't get the wrong idea and we have our reputations tarnished forever? They had to change the narrative. And so the narrative got rewritten, and this has been passed on since then in all kinds of books, textbooks, scholarly books, articles, talking points that have taken hold in academia. You can summarize it with the phrase, the big lie, and let me summarize what the big lie is. It took fascism and placed it in the right-wing column rather than where it belonged and belongs in the left-wing column. Obscured the socialist part of fascism and then tried to pin it on the Republicans, on the right, people on the right, conservatives, and President Trump. Meanwhile, the fact of the matter is that the most destructive and genocidal schemes of the fascists and the Nazis were in fact inspired by the American left and the Democrats. History just doesn't back up the narrative that the left tries to play out to this day, that at a certain point the parties, even if the Democrats were, in favor of segregation and all the segregation laws, as we already quoted, were written by Democrat legislators and signed by Democrat governors and enforced by Democrat officials, even if that was the case, now the narrative goes, well, they swapped positions. The parties swapped positions in the 1960s. And now the Democrats are the good guys and the Republicans are the bad guys. Well, let's take a closer look at all of this. Let's talk about racism a little bit and slavery. The slaves could not provide for themselves, but then on the other hand, they were taken care of for life, wouldn't they? If they were weren't they on the plantation? They were labor, so they had to be taken care of. Otherwise, the labor is not going to work. The founders of America they were convinced that slavery was on its way out. They sharply criticized it as contradicting our founding principles, and they took serious measures to reduce and eliminate it as much as the circumstances permitted them to do. But here's the key point. Whose sin was slavery? Slavery was not, as the left would have us think, a sin of the South or a sin of America. That's the leftist narrative. The facts show slavery is the sin of the Democratic Party. Because it wasn't just a phenomenon in the South. It was also a phenomenon in the North. Supporters of slavery there, and also part now of the response to the diminishing and eventual abolishing of the slave plantation in the South, was that the Northern Democrats conspired with the Southern Democrats to start giving a new form to slavery existing in the northern cities. We're going to look at this in a second. But Lincoln identified the key sin inherent in slavery. Again, a sin of the Democrat Party, which endures to this day. And what did he identify as the essence of that sin? You toil, you labor, and earn bread. And I'll eat it. For President Lincoln, the essence of slavery was not the racism, it was theft. Taking somebody else's hard-earned goods for yourself. The essence of the sin of slavery in his mind was theft. And he wanted to save America from a Democratic effort, a Democratic Party effort, to make the whole nation a plantation. What are we talking about? Martin Van Buren, New York Democrat. Let's look at him for a moment. The book goes into him in some detail, as does the movie. He took the concept of the Southern plantation and applied it to the northern cities. Who were going to be the dependent ones, like the slaves were on the plantations? Well, there was an influx of immigrants. People were coming in from various countries. They were poor, they were insecure, they were desperate, they were vulnerable. And the thrust of the party, let me just keep putting a few keywords here on the board. I'm going through this very quickly. I need you to read this book and watch this movie. The thrust of the party was to do this: make the vulnerable dependent on their largesse, on their disbursements of money and provisions. Make the vulnerable people dependent on them in exchange for what? Political support. Votes. Van Buren set up these political machines in the northern cities, like in New York, it was Tammany Hall. And he would set these things up, and in exchange for the votes of the people were beneficiaries of these patronage systems that people like Van Buren were setting up all over the place. So the goal of the party was, let's turn all America into this plantation. Now, somebody who really wanted this to happen and stepped on the gas to make this happen was the Democrat President Woodrow Wilson, to establish a national plantation ruled by the national government, a powerfully centralized state, introducing federal segregation, inciting racial terrorism. As I said, Wilson did the screening of this movie, Birth of a Nation, in the White House, knowing what kind of publicity that would give to it. And it actually reignited on a national level the Ku Klux Klan, which previously to that had been a more regional Southern phenomenon. Now, what the left says is that in the 1960s, the parties switched sides on this issue, and that in the South, the Southern racist Democrats, called the Dixiecrats, were brought by Richard Nixon into the Republican Party. But history doesn't bear this out. First of all, it's not accurate to call Nixon's strategy a Southern strategy, because it wasn't the deep Southern states that he was going after. And it wasn't because of him that they eventually became Republican territory. That happened later under Reagan, and not for reasons related to racism. What happened instead, and furthermore, what's also not borne out historically is this notion that these racist Southern Democrats all shifted over to Republican. That's not the case. And D'Souza shows that there was only one member of the House and one senator, that was Strom Thurmond, by the way, who switched from being a Dixiecrat over to a Republican. But that's it. None of the other ones did. So this rewritten history narrative that the left uses does not play out. The shift of the South to become Republican territory, as I said, happened under President Reagan, and that was because of the vision and the values that he was standing for and articulating so well, not because of racism. As a matter of fact, the South became more Republican when, in fact, it became less racist. Now, what then can the left point to if that other narrative doesn't work? Well, a more modern day event, namely Charlottesville riots. Oh, look, here now, they say, is evidence that the right wing are the racists and fascists. Charlottesville. Here you have people being Trump supporters, wearing Trump hats and committing this violence and affirming white supremacy. Well, who is the poster boy of white supremacy in the midst of this particular story? Well, it's a guy by the name of Richard Spencer. Now, very interestingly, you will hear Spencer talking when you watch this movie, Death of a Nation. And you will see Dinesh interviewing him. And the narrative that the left is trying to use is that this ringleader of white supremacy is somehow allied with Trump and the Republicans and the conservatives. But when Dinesh interviews him and asks him what he really thinks on various issues, you find he is not at all a conservative. He's on the left, not on the right. They call him the leader of the alt-right movement, but it's not right. It's actually left. In what ways? Does he affirm and celebrate the founding fathers? No, he has no particular appreciation of the founders. President Trump and the Republicans and the conservatives do. Does Spencer believe in God? No, he's an atheist. Does he believe in God-given rights? No, he says we don't have any rights. He doesn't even believe in individual rights. He says individuals have rights only to the extent that they are members of this collective of the state. Is that what President Trump, Republicans and conservatives believe? Of course not. We believe exactly the opposite. That there are God-given rights and that government exists to defend those rights. In fact, those words come from the Declaration of Independence. Spencer and the alt-right and the white supremacists, this is not conservative at all. Immigration, Dinesh asked him about his views on that. He believes in white-only immigration. He draws the line racially. Where does President Trump draw the line? Legally. He says we want people of all backgrounds, of all faiths, of all ethnicities coming into America, but we want them coming legally, with respect for the law, not in a way that disregards or breaks the law. Strong state control. What does President Trump and the Republican Party represent? More power for the people, like Lincoln said, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. What does Spencer stand for? Tight, centralized government, strong state control, dispensing entitlements, whereas on the other hand, President Trump believes in the free market economy. And when Dinesh asked Spencer about who his favorite president was, Spencer named two Democrat presidents. Andrew Jackson, the founder of the Democratic Party, and President Polk. Well, very revealing narrative and interview. The modern day Democrat plantation embodied in things that we have seen Presidents Clinton and Obama call for and lobby for, and you see it in the Democrat-controlled cities of America. The black ghettos, the Latino barrios, the Native American reservations. Unfortunately, and this is not saying anything negative about these populations, it's showing the dynamic of oppression that has been imposed here in America. The characteristics of the plantation, unfortunately, are seen in these situations. Those characteristics being the breakdown of family life, increased violence, increased despair and hopelessness, the sense of not being able to get anywhere, nihilism, no sense of opportunity, dilapidated housing. Don't we see this in these Democrat-controlled cities? President Trump, listen to the rallies that he's having during these days, is one of the things we're urging people to do in preparation for the elections, and he's pointing out the progress that is being made for these people. Did he not tell us in so many of these rallies? The unemployment level is at its lowest in history for the African American community, and its lowest generally since the last 50 years. In what ways, then, does this Democrat Party today show the signs of fascism? The fascists are against precisely what the Republicans and President Trump are for. Again, you just trace this historically. They are against freedom of speech and religion, against American nationalism, against individual liberty, against limited government, against capitalism. Instead, former President Obama, he stood for government control of banks and investment companies and education and healthcare and energy companies. This is how fascism is defined, brothers and sisters. Don't let people make you or others think that somehow this is the description of what the right wing in America today actually stands for. We also see fascism operating in what we call the deep state, right? The use of government power agencies like our intelligence agencies or the IRS to persecute conservatives, to be used against political enemies, this is not what America is about. This is what fascism is about. And what about what we already saw about the control of free speech, the suppression of free speech, the reign of political correctness? This, too, seen in the areas of all our different cultural institutions, in media and academia, and in entertainment. Is President Trump challenging the media or what? You see, it's exactly the opposite of what the narrative of the left would have us believe. And groups like Antifa that pretend to be fighting the fascism of the right, they're actually embracing fascism. They do not believe in free speech. Here's the bottom line, brothers and sisters, and here is how we would summarize the lesson of this book and of this movie that I'm tracing for you very quickly. The progressives and the Democratic Party are the true racists and fascists of today. Because when you get beyond just throwing slogans around and you look into the philosophy, the platforms, what these people stand for and have stood for historically and have interacted with one another and borrowed from one another, you see the kinship among those who would take away our liberty, take away our lives, try to control our lives, steal our income and our earnings, kill America by killing the economic, political, and religious freedom that we are meant to enjoy. President Reagan had something to say about this. When he talked about fascism, he said, fascism will come to America in the form of liberalism. He said, instead, the idea of conservatism is less government, get off my back, out of my pocket, and give me control of my own destiny. What liberals want for us? Government control and regulation of our freedom and of our personal affairs. Bottom line being, the parties have not switched sides or switched philosophies. What the Democrat Party has done, and this book traces it in far more detail than I'm doing with you today, is they have found in generation after generation, president after president, administration after administration, amid changing political and cultural tides, they have always found a way to keep the plantation going, to keep populations dependent upon this strong centralized government that can give them all kinds of entitlements in exchange for their political loyalty. And when people are not free to determine and control their destiny, when they are not free to express themselves with the free and robust kind of speech that our president has been so strong in defending and that the Republican Party is trying to advance, when people are not free economically to create their own destiny, but have to feel like the government is going to take away what they themselves toiled to earn, well then when all these things are happening, that's what constitutes the death of a nation. Instead, we have a president and a party in the Republicans who are trying to do something as they try to preserve our liberties, and we can help them do it in this election. And that, brothers and sisters, is to shut down this democratic plantation once and for all. Not to let it keep rearing its ugly head in the ugly policies that Democrat Party wants to impose on us. Can we save America a second time? Is what Death of a Nation asks. The answer is yes. And whether that answer will come to pass depends very much on this election, and whether or not voters are going to put back into power in the United States Congress or back into power on the state level the party that has proven itself to be a party that embraces the ideals of fascism and Nazism and is opposed to our freedoms. This is why, by the way, they're also opposed to the right to life. If you can take away someone's life, as the Democrat platform says can be done to the children in the womb, well then, you've got everything. It's no big surprise that they're going to try to take away your money or your freedom. If they can take away your life, they can take away everything else. This talk about centralized government. You see, they always try to spin this the opposite of what the truth really is, because they try to take oppression and present it as freedom. So the worst oppression of all, denying the very right to life, is presented as some kind of freedom. It's slavery. It's all about slavery with these people on the left. Let's not give them one shred of political power as a result of this election. Not 1 ounce. Let's get rid of the Democrat plantation once and for all, and let's save America a second time. So I really thank Dinesh D'Souza for this book and this movie. It is eye-opening. That's the term that really describes this study, this detailed study. And I don't think that it's possible for me to do it justice in a presentation like this. Read every page of this book. But again, watch the movie. And let me give it to you once again. Death of a Nation movie. .com. You can view the movie, you can view it tonight, on demand. Look down, just scroll down the website, and you'll be able to see the places where you can find it on demand, download it for a very reasonable price. And I've set you up for it. I've given you some broad stroke ideas of the arguments that are developed, but watch it in detail, and you will be persuaded as I am, of the truth of this message. So brothers and sisters, thank you so much. I want to have here now for our conclusion in this program the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and that's actually how the movie concludes, with a choir singing this beautiful hymn, because the Battle Hymn of the Republic puts our hearts, our minds, our souls where they should be as we consider these very, very momentous dynamics that have affected American history, that have tried to pull our country apart, and that are again at work in this election. Momentous dynamics. It's not just about an issue. It's not just about a candidate. It's about what party is going to steer America. The Republican Party that elected its first president by the name of Abraham Lincoln, or a Democrat Party that had the racist Woodrow Wilson reviving the Ku Klux Klan. Which is it going to be? Let's choose in such a way that we together can sing glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. God bless you.
His truth is marching Hello, I'm Evangelist Alveda King. I'm blessed to work with Priests for Life, one of the largest and most visible pro-life ministries in the world. Our whole team relies on your financial support to be able to do our work, produce our programs, and travel the world to advocate for the unborn. May I ask you to support us generously? Go today to prolifedonation.org and give as generous a gift as you can. We appreciate it and will pray for you each day.
Many pro-life people worked hard to elect President Donald Trump. That hard work has paid off for the pro-life movement and the unborn. Here are just some of the pro-life accomplishments of the president and his administration. Number 10. President Trump has called on Congress to pass key pro-life legislation to protect babies and defund the abortion industry. Number 9. President Trump has filled his administration with strong pro-life people in key positions. Number 8. President Trump has ended the HHS mandate, forcing employers to cover abortion in health insurance. Number 7. President Trump set up new conscience protections for those who refuse to participate in abortions. Number 6. President Trump ended the secrecy about which health insurance plans cover abortion. Number 5. President Trump stopped funding the abortion industry overseas. Number 4. President Trump protected your tax dollars from funding abortion through Title X. Number 3. President Trump gave the states the right to stop funding Planned Parenthood and abortion. Number 2. President Trump appointed 2 pro-life Supreme Court justices and dozens of other pro-life federal judges. And the number one thing, the first and greatest thing that President Trump did for the pro-life movement was to keep Hillary Clinton out of the White House. To all of you who voted for President Trump in 2016, congratulations. Your vote paid off. But be sure to get out and vote again this 2018 midterm election so that the president has a strong pro-life Congress to enable him to continue winning more victories for the cause of life.